In today's world building workshop, we are going to create some fantasy creatures. I'm going to tell you the basic questions I ask myself when I create new life and show you the kind of research that I do, and well, we'll find out together where this is going to lead us today. First thing first, if you're interested in world building, don't forget to subscribe, because this is only topic number 2 of many world building topics that I have planned. In my last world building video, I talked about creating fantasy creatures and aliens, and I talked about some principles and techniques that I am now going to use to actually create some stuff, to give you something a little bit more concrete to go off of. So today I am going to create one sentient creature that is going to be based on an animal or 2 animals on our world. I'm also going to create one sentient creature that is based on a fantasy creature, you know, a classic fantasy creature. And I'm going to create one non-sentient creature and one plant. So let's get to that. If you've watched my video on maps, then this is the same world that I have created a map for before, and I'm going to show you that map because it's going to be relevant in this video as well. So I have the world, and again, I have written sort of a story in this world that I'm not going to use that story for anything, so I'm going to change this world up. But I do know that I want some sort of sentient creature that lives in water. So this is the creature that I'm going to take and base off of an animal in our world, because I don't want to create a version of mermaids. I don't want to base it off of mermaids, because I want to create something new and interesting and fun. And I've already decided what animal in our world that I want to base this on, and I'm going to base it on turtles, because I think turtles are kind of cool. So once I've decided that this is going to be a creature that is based on turtles, the first thing that I do is do some basic research about turtles. It's not going to be very deep, it's just basic things like what they look like and what different kinds there are, and how they eat, what they eat, how they reproduce, and things like that. It's not something that I necessarily am going to use for the creature that I'm creating, but it's good to know. And again, you don't have to spend hours and hours upon this. I have already done this, and I spent maybe half an hour, maybe an hour, and that's just because I got stuck. So like I said, I have some basic questions that I ask myself when I create a creature like this, a creature like any creature really. And the first question is, what does it look like? So, what does this creature look like? And to me, this creature is going to look basically like a turtle. It's going to have a shell, it's going to have flippers, it's not going to have fingers or hands, I already said that. And yeah, I'm basically just going to make them look like turtles, with maybe some slight differences. So here are some images on turtle I've just Googled, and yeah, this is basically what they're going to look like. I am going to... Can I see the picture? Can't see the picture. Different picture. There's the picture. This is what they're going to look like. I'm going to make some differences though, because I want to make them a little bit... I don't want to make them just turtles that are sentient, because you can do that too. There's nothing wrong with that, but I wanted to do something a little bit different for this workshop at least. So the thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to make them change color, and I'm going to make them change color depending on what they eat. So basically every individual that lives in one place will eat roughly the same thing, so they will look more or less the same color-wise. But if you meet a different individual that lives far away and eats different things, they're going to have different color schemes. And it's basically just going to go between like blue and green and nothing, you know, fancy like pink or purple or orange or something. Those are fancy colors. And yes, their color is going to depend both on what kind of food they have available where they live, but also what kind of food they like. If one individual don't like this particular fish, but another one does, their colors are going to be slightly different. And I am going to get to food more in depth in a little bit. So that's just simple. I haven't yet decided really how big they are. This is just the basic. This is what they look like. They look like turtles, and their shells change color depending on what they eat. We can leave it at that for now, and move on to the next question, which is, where do they live? And with this, I mean both geographically, where do they live in the world? Do they live on land or in water? And do they live in groups, or are they solitary? It's all of those things. So obviously these turtles are mostly sea-dwelling. because turtles are mostly sea-dwelling. But they do breathe air, so they can go up on land, and they have to get up above the surface sometimes to breathe, because that's how turtles work. And again, this is research that I've done on turtles. How often do they have to breathe? And I'm sort of basing it on that and sort of just changing things up. And I'm going to say that these creatures can go 5 hours or so between breathing. So they can go up to the surface and then be in the water, in the depths, for about 5 hours, and then they have to go back up and breathe again. And I mean, they can probably manage a little bit longer than 5 hours. They might be able to, because again, that's the thing. Turtles, if they get stuck or if they are hibernating, for example, they can be underwater for a very, very, very long time. But if they're moving around, they need to breathe more often, obviously, because they use up more air. That's exactly how a human works as well. So 5 hours is you're supposed to go up to the surface every 5 hours or so, but you can manage longer than that, in case for some reason you can't go up to the surface right now. So that is where they live. They live in the sea. Geographically speaking, again, basing this on turtles, they live more or less all over the globe, but not too far south and not too far north, because it gets too cold there. So over most of the globe. And they're going to avoid anywhere where there's ice, because ice is bad, because then you can't get up over the surface and, breathe. No ice. What about socially? Do they live as a group, or do they live more solitarily? And I'm going to say that they live in groups, and I'm going to say that family and society and things like that are very, very important to them. So they live in groups. Family is important to them. And that is where we're going to leave this question about where they live for now. And we're moving on to the next question, which is where things start to get a little bit more interesting, because that is, what are their senses? Like I said in my previous video on this topic, I tend to not get too adventurous with senses. I tend to not give my creatures an extra sense apart from the 5 that we have as humans, because I don't know how to describe those senses. It's something I would really, really like to do in the future, but I'm not going to do that here. Here, I'm going to focus on these 5. So, what about their hearing, these turtle creatures? Turtles can hear. Turtles do have ears. You just can't see them because they're all internal. They don't have these things. And they can hear mostly very low frequency sounds, and they can also detect somehow with their ears water displacement. So even if there's no sound, they can sense the change in water pressure to sense if there's something close by them. So that's basically how these creatures are going to work as well. They hear slightly better underwater than they do on land, and they mostly hear low frequency sounds, which is going to be interesting in a different question a little later. But yes, they have hearing. Gonna make these bold so we can see better. And yes, just like they can detect changes in water pressure, they can also detect those same kind of changes in air if they're on land. What about sight? Yes, they can see. They have eyes, but they have eyes that are, again, adapted to see very well underwater, so they can see a lot better underwater than they can on land. But yes, they can see. Next is a sense of smell, and the sense of smell is something that is not really all that useful underwater, and I don't actually know if turtles have a sense of smell, but I'm gonna say that these creatures do not. They can't smell anything. Nope. Taste, however, yes, they do have a sense of taste. They can prefer some food over other food because it tastes better. Compared to humans, I don't know. It's not really relevant right now. if they have a better or worse sense of taste than humans do, so I'll wait with that, but they do have a sense of taste. And then the last one, touch. I think that they have a sense of touch, but on their shell it probably doesn't work all that well because that's very hard. I think they can probably feel if there's something on their shell, but they can't feel, you know, very detailed. And if it's a very slight touch, they probably can't feel that, is my thinking. Again, don't really know turtles and their sense of touch, so this I'm just taking off of the fact that I don't think that their shells would be very sensitive, but flippers and head probably has a sense of touch. I don't know if it's called skin, scales. I don't know. Doesn't really matter. They would probably disagree. So my next question is food. I promised I'd get to this. What does this creature eat? How do they find their food? How do they hunt their food if they're hunters? And where is this creature on the food chain? That is the next question we are going to answer. And here is where I don't know a whole lot again about turtles, didn't research that very well, but again, didn't need to research it very well. But I do know that turtles are omnivores. They can eat both meat and vegetables. So I do think they do that. I also do think they hunt in a way, because turtles are very slow on land, but very agile in water. So they can probably hunt to a certain extent. And especially if they find, you know, is it called a school of fish? I think it's called a school of fish. A big group of fish. I mean, that's what a lot of hunters in the waters do. They just dive right into that and get a few of them in their mouth, and the rest of them scutter away. Anyway, they are omnivores. Yes. And they hunt a bit, but also, you know, there's seaweed and other things that just grow that they can just eat. I don't think they cook their food because, yeah, how would they do that? I think they eat everything raw. Hunt small fish, otherwise eat seaweed or other stationary things. And the next question about where they are on the food chain. They are probably fairly high up, but I'm gonna guess that like sharks and other things are actually above them. Because these creatures, again, since they don't have hands or fingers or anything like that, they can't create tools. They can probably use tools. I mean, if they have a rock, they can smash something under that rock, or some, yeah. They can probably do that, but they can't create things, which means that they can't place themselves higher on the food chain, which is what we humans have done. So fairly high on the food chain, but sharks are mean. Next question, and now we're getting into the really interesting bits, which is how do they communicate? Because turtles don't really communicate in the way that humans do. They don't really do it via sound a lot, and I'm not thinking I'm gonna give them like a tongue, or like, well, they have, but I'm not thinking I'm gonna give them a way to speak like humans do, because that doesn't work overly well underwater. And I also want to explore telepathy. So these creatures, they communicate telepathically. So the next question is, because there is a difference in how we communicate, because we have words, but like any communicator will tell you, the things that we say with our words are not all that we mean. We have hand gestures, we have facial expressions, we have body language and intonation and all that. I suppose you could do intonation with telepathy as well. Facial expressions, I don't know if turtles are really, if they can do complicated enough facial expressions. And either way, I think I'm going to make it all go telepathically, but you can communicate words like on purpose, and you can change the intonation or the equivalent of intonation, but you also sort of automatically transmit emotions, I guess. Let's see, we'll figure this out. Conversations, words, transmitted on purpose, transmitted. Emotions are conveyed in a more, that just kind of happens, which also probably means that it's very difficult to lie unless you can, with some work, change the emotions that you transmit. But I don't really see a reason why evolution would have made that happen. Why making it possible to lie would be a evolutionary trait, a good evolutionary trait. So I'm gonna make it so they can't change the emotions they send out. That just happens, which means if you're sad, you can't pretend that you're not sad, because, you know, it's right there. It's being transmitted to everyone around you. So they can't control that. Are transmitted. So that means automatically I have now created a very honest creature, because they can't lie, at least to each other. So the next question is, since I just said that emotions are transmitted to everyone around you, I'm going to say that both emotions and conversation, like anything that you transmit on purpose, is also transmitted sort of to everyone. You can't pick out that I want to talk to that person over there, but no one else around us can hear anything. So it's transmitted over a certain distance, and you can probably make that smaller or bigger, just like, you know, whispering or shouting. But you can't pick just one person to hone in on and just talk to that one. And then this question is, can you change the distance only for conversation or also for emotions? Can you shut down so that only people within like a decimeter from you can sense your emotions? I mean, I suppose, yeah, let's say you can do that. Because that means that you can pretend to not be sad, but you're also not transmitting your emotions, so people won't know if you're sad or not. And that could be a good source of conflict if someone always, you know, keeps their emotions to themselves, literally. Yeah, let's say that. The next question is, like, how far can you send out thoughts and emotions? And I guess that's going to depend. I'll just make that a thing that I will figure out once it's important for the story. And the next question for this particular creature is going to be, how do they transfer information over generations? Because they will not have a, you know, be able to write down knowledge for the next generation. So that all needs to come from, I mean, someone telling stories to the younger generation, which, I mean, that's how humans did it before we invented writing. But let's make things a little bit more interesting here. Let's give these creatures some kind of like species memory, because you're transmitting emotions and conversation, but you're transmitting emotions all the time. So why not, when you die, you transmit your knowledge? Basically, you transmit everything that you know and think and feel to everyone who's around you within a certain distance. That way, everyone around you will learn whatever it is that you already know, and when they die, they will automatically give that knowledge to the next generation. I kind of like that. I really like that, actually. So let's go with that. They transfer knowledge over. And of course, what this also means is that any dirty secrets you have is also going to be transmitted, which again ties into this being a very honest society, because you don't want people to find out the horrible thing that you did the moment you die. That seems yeah, you don't want that. So you probably don't do horrible things to start with, and probably you're open about it beforehand as well, so that it doesn't come to as a shock to everyone who's close by when you die. There is that, unless you go very, very far away to die. But that has to, I mean, that probably happens. Like, oh, your grandfather went away and no one was near him when he died, so obviously he had some dirty secret that he couldn't let anyone know. That's probably a sort of shame to any family that has someone who dies far away from home. So the next question, and we're still on communication. How do these creatures communicate, or can they communicate with land-based creatures like humans or other whatever else I create on land? So the first thing is they have telepathy. Does this telepathy work towards humans or other sentient creatures? Can they send thoughts to them? And I'm gonna go with yes, if they know the language, because these are words they're communicating with, I'm thinking. And so they need to know the language of the person they're trying to communicate with, both within their own species and other species. So yes, they can send thoughts with words to humans and other creatures. I don't think they can send emotions, or rather, I don't think that... I mean, that depends. I think that other creatures are probably not going to understand these creatures' emotions, so they're not going to be able to send, I am sad. I don't know. I'm going to say that humans and other species don't have a way to translate that to something that they will understand. So yeah, no, you can communicate with words to a human. And then the next question is, humans don't have telepathy. Or other, again, it's not just humans. Any land-based sentient creature that doesn't have telepathy, how do they communicate back? Is this just a one-sided conversation? That sounds stupid, so no, that's not how it's going to be. But these creatures, they can hear. I did say that before. They can hear, so a human should be able to just talk to them. But then there's the thing where turtles and these creatures only hear low-pitched sounds. I don't know how low-pitched, but it's possible that if you're human, you have to have a really, really low voice to be able to communicate with these creatures, because otherwise they just can't hear you, and then you'll have to just write down what you have to say instead. And of course, both of these things, if they speak or if they write, that only works if this creature, this turtle creature, understands the language. But, I mean, if one turtle creature a while ago learned the language of humans or other sentient creatures and then died, that knowledge will have been given to everyone else without them having to study. That's convenient. There's of course also the option of sign language. A human can probably do that. They can communicate with sign language to these creatures, to write or use language instead. Since, again, turtles can see, not super well, but they should be able to see well enough to understand the sign language if, again, someone at some point had learned it. So let's go with that. There might also be a magical or a way to communicate through technology with these creatures, but that I'm gonna get to in those episodes about magic and technology instead. Let's move on from this right now. So we're gonna go with the next question, which is, how do these creatures reproduce and what are their life cycles? This is again based on turtles, so the mothers go up on land, they lay their eggs, they bury their eggs in the sand, and then they go back into the water. When does fertilization happen? Let's see, turtles, fertilization, internal, apparently. Okay, so they're fertilized in the water just offshore for turtles, so I'm gonna do the same here. So they copulate in the water, and then the mothers go up and they bury their eggs in the sand, and then they go back into the water and to wherever they live. And then the eggs hatch after a while. The little turtles go into the water, which is a very dangerous thing for turtles, and it's going to be dangerous for these creatures as well because they're tiny, and there are a whole bunch of creatures that want to eat them before they make it to the water. It's also probably fairly common that the eggs get eaten because, again, that happens to turtle eggs all the time. Babies hatch, go into water, and then they go to the colony. The colony. Go to the colony. And here's the thing, because this means that these creatures are not overly fussed with their babies. They don't stay there and take care of them, which means that there are going to be a lot of babies, a lot of eggs, and it's going to be assumed that most of them are not going to make it back to their colony. The babies go back to their colony, and they can probably sense where their colony is through some sort of telepathy, and they come back, and when they come back, they sort of connect to their parents, their mother and their father, or one of them, and when that happens, that is where their own telepathy is activated, and this is when they are considered having been born. Before that, they're nothing. You don't care about just hatched babies that die because they're not people yet. They're not people until they got back to their colony and their telepathy is activated. That's natural, because if all of the eggs that were laid became people and came back, and that it would just become too many people. So yeah. Anyway, and I also think that this means that they don't have a baby period as such. When their telepathy has been activated, they are children, but they can communicate and in some way take care of themselves. So no baby period. So that's the life cycle. They hatch from eggs on a sandy beach, they go to their colony, they connect to their parents or other relative in case their parents are dead, and that's when they are born. They live their lives, they live their life in the water, come up to the surface to breathe sometimes, and when they die, their memories and knowledge gets telepathically transferred to everyone who is nearby. In this, I have now just assumed that they are male or female, and I'm going to make it that easy, partially because I have already been doing this for quite a while and I don't want to get into more complicated things. So these creatures are male or female, and obviously they can also have non-binary people and all of that, but let's not get too much into genders right now. I would love to, but I will do that in a different video. Right now, this is where I want to leave these creatures. I do have one more question about creatures, but I'm not going to answer that here. The question is, what are their names? What is this species called? What they call themselves, and what do others call them? But I'm going to talk about that in a coming episode that is going to be all about names. So you'll have to wait until then. So next, and I'm going to make sure that these are a bit shorter, because now I don't have to explain all of the questions that I'm going to ask. I'm going to try to make these shorter. Next, we're going to talk about a sentient creature that is based on a classic fantasy creatures, because I talked about that too, and I really like creating these. So yes, again, already decided what I am going to base these creatures on, and that would be these guys, because I have never actually created a creature that is based on dwarves before. So that's what I'm going to do today. And the method I'm going to use for this, it is basically like the turtle ones I just made, and it works on any creature that you want to change. So I'm going to first just real quick, what are the characteristics of dwarves, of the classical fantasy creature of a dwarf? They are short, they have beards, they are craftsmen, they create things and they mine and miners. So they are good with stone and metal. That tends to be a thing. They live underground. They are often kind of cranky. And violent, I want to say. I'm not sure if that's true, but I mean, looking at these all have weapons, and they fight with axes, and yeah. So, yeah, cranky and violent. So this is my view of dwarves. You probably have something else that you think it's not a dwarf if it's not this. And the same goes for any other creature. But I'm going to go with these for now. So the next question is, what do I want to use with this? Because I don't have to use all of these, and I just want to look at what is the most interesting part to me. And to me, that is the fact that they live underground. So I'm going to base everything else off of that. And I know technically the most important characteristic of a dwarf is probably that they're short, but yeah, I don't care. So what do they look like? They live underground, and okay, I'm gonna talk about them being short, because that does make sense that they're shorter than humans. Because back in the day, when we mined in a lot less safe way than we do now, miners used to use children to be able to get into the smallest nooks and crannies of the mine. So this creature, if they live underground and need to go through small crevices, they need to be fairly small. So they are shorter than humans. And with this, these pictures don't make sense, because these are short, but they're very stocky. And if my thinking now is that they're gonna be able to get through places, they need to be short and also small. They need to be slender. So yeah, I'm gonna make them slender. And already, I'm not even sure that I can call these dwarves anymore, because people might protest. And slender. And I know now I'm talking about mining, and mining is not the reason that these creatures were created or evolved. They didn't evolve to mine, they evolved to live underground. So yes, they could probably have been larger and just not used the smallest kinds of caves, but that's irrelevant for these creatures because these creatures are small. But they also need to be strong, especially if I'm also going to have them be miners. But that makes sense. They can be slender but still strong. Look at any ballet dancer. They're not, muscly like that, but they are incredibly strong. So yes, they can still be strong. What about the beards? They have bears. Apparently they have bears. Beards. What about the beards? Yes, they will have beards. They live underground. Underground tends to be kind of cold, so it makes sense to be very hairy. So it's probably not just beards. They're probably hairier than humans all over. Maybe people can mistake them for bears. Anyway. So they might actually have fur. It might not be that they're hairy. I mean, I'm hairy, but this is not fur. But maybe they actually have some sort of fur. And obviously, this should go without saying, but this is going to go for both men and women, because I don't see why women should be colder than men. Again, now I'm just assuming that they are male or female. We'll see. I'll get to that. So they do have beards, and they are hairy in general. They might not actually have beards, but just be hairy, have fur. That probably makes more sense. They have fur. There we go. I talked about, in my previous video, I talked about creatures living underground being very pale because they don't get exposed to sunlight. And, I mean, they have fur, so it doesn't really matter if they're pale or not. So I'm going to ignore that. Let's leave that for now and go on to where they live. They live in caves. They live underground. They can move between, they don't have to be underground, they can go out onto the surface, because why not? And I don't think they live in the darkest part of a cave. They probably live where there is some sort of light, but they can go into the darkest parts as well. Yeah. And they also live, I mean, I'm going to say they live all over the world, geographically speaking. As long as there are caves, there are dwarves, or whatever I'm going to call these. And the next question is, do they create their dwellings, or do they just find natural caves? And I'm going to say that they do both. They enhance natural caves, or if there are no natural caves in a place where they decide to move to, they are craftsmen. They can create caves. So, natural caves. Let's leave that for now and move on to their census. And for their census, I'm gonna do a quick Googling that you don't need to see. I'm gonna Google bats, because bats live in caves, and yeah, I'm gonna do that. I will get right back to you. I'm back. I have Googled bats. Bats are really, really cool, and also, I have to say, if I find my cursor, bats are really, really cute. They're adorable. That said, I'm not going to put bat characteristics on these creatures, at least not physical characteristics. I just wanted to know sort of what kind of census and how bats work, because bats live in caves and these creatures live in caves. So, yeah, that made sense to me. So, we are looking at hearing, and yes, they have hearing. They probably have very, very good hearing. Again, basing this on bats, I don't think I'm gonna give these creatures echolocation or sonar, but they have very good hearing. Sight, yes, they have sight. They can see. They have eyes. They probably have eyes that work a lot better in low level lighting than in, you know, full daylight. So they can probably see a lot better than humans in the dark or in the mostly dark, but probably not as well in full daylight. So what about smell? They have a sense of smell, they have noses. I'm thinking that they look, I realize I didn't put that on what they look like. They're shorter than humans and slender. They still look humanoid. They have, you know, they look like a human but smaller and with fur. So smell, they do have a sense of smell. They probably have a better sense of smell than humans do, because what I know, my very limited knowledge about mining, it is very important to keep track of like gases and things like that underground. I know they have a bunch of machines down there that detect what the air quality is like, and they used to have canaries down there. And when the canary died, they knew they had to run away because there was gases that they couldn't smell. So I'm thinking that if these creatures have evolved to live underground where these kinds of gases and other things are common, they probably have a very, very keen sense of smell that can also smell those kinds of gases that humans can't. So they have a sense of smell, and it's very good. Taste, yeah, they have taste. I don't think there's anything special about it. Touch, same there. I think they have the same sensations that we do, more or less. So, yeah, nothing special. Moving on to what they eat, how they find their food, and where they are on the food chain. There, regarding the food chain, I'm thinking they're basically on the same level as a human would be, so very high up. They can create weapons and things that make them more dangerous than they are naturally. So very high on the food chain. And the next question is, what kind of food is available in caves? And I mean, there are going to be insects and like snails and certain like salamanders that live underground. If there are underground lakes, there's probably fish and things like that. So I think they eat a bunch of that. And then they probably go outside of the caves to find food as well. And there, I'm thinking they probably hunt. Yeah, I don't see a reason why they wouldn't. They hunt and they gather food. They possibly farm as well. That shouldn't be impossible, depending on where they live. If it's too rocky around where they live, it might not be great for farming. But, yeah. So that's where they find their food, and that's how they hunt. They probably make weapons to hunt with. Regarding hunting, though, they probably don't hunt very large animals because they still need to get them into their caves, or they need to spend a lot of time outside, you know, dismembering their kills in order to get them inside. So I think they mostly hunt smaller game that is easy to carry around because they don't want to spend a lot of time outside of their caves. I mean, I'm sure they could eat, you know, a moose if they managed to kill one, but I don't think they really do hunt for them because they're too big. It would be inconvenient to try to get into their caves, especially if their caves are, if it's difficult to get in there, which to me it makes sense if it is. That part might very well vary depending on where they live, what their caves are like, what the land around is like, and things like that. So that's probably not species specific, but still. The next question, how do they communicate? And I'm thinking they communicate via sound, just like humans do. They have a language like ours, but I do think that their voices are very low, both in terms of volume and frequency, because otherwise it would echo a lot in caves. I'm not an expert at this, and it's very, very difficult to Google how echoing works, because, yeah, if I Google in English, I get Amazon Echo and Alexa devices, and Echo Whisper, that's still that, because how to turn on the whisper mode, and I don't know what that is. And it's not easier to Google in Swedish, because then I just find a lot of things about trees, because the Swedish words for echo and oak are very similar, and it's just the whole thing. So I can't be bothered. But from my unscientific explorations, lower volume and lower frequency makes it echo less. So I think that these creatures have voices, but they are much lower than humans, which, incidentally, would probably make it a lot easier for them to communicate with the turtle creatures that I just created, because the turtle creatures heard lower volumes. So maybe humans can't communicate with them in with sound, but these creatures can. Entirely possible. So, yes, and again, the echo thing, I'm not entirely certain that this is correct, and if I was doing this for real, I would spend a lot more time trying to Google this, but it was just too difficult for this video, so I didn't bother. Normally, I definitely would have, and if I couldn't Google it, I would have asked someone who works with audio or something like that to, yeah, that is research that you should do if you're putting a creature like this in your story. I'm just not doing it now because I am lazy. Next question, how do they reproduce and what are their life cycles like? And again, they're humanoids, so I'm gonna say that they reproduce similarly to humans, and they give birth to a living child, which needs many, many years of being taken care of before they are capable of taking care of themselves. So they have a baby phase, and then a child phase, and a teenage phase, and things like that. Again, not going too deep into genders. I would have liked to, but this video is too long already. I will do a video on genders. I will probably do more than one video on genders in the future, but not bothering with that here, unfortunately. But I do want to do something else. I want to make these creatures, first of all, similarly to humans, but I do want their life cycles to be different. I'm going to make their life cycles shorter than humans, because that's unusual. Usually in fantasy you see creatures that live for thousands or hundreds at least of years, but I'm going to make these creatures live shorter. I'm not going to make it super short, but if a human, and I'm basing this, humans in our world right now with our level of technology has a life expectancy of roughly 80, depends on where you live in the world. So if a human has a life expectancy of 80, I'm going to make these creatures live I don't know, life expectancy of 60. That's not a lot shorter, but it is still enough to make a difference. Because that will make a difference as to what is considered old in their society, and probably also to when their children are considered adults and how fast they mature. I'm not going to go into that, exactly how fast they mature. That is the kind of thing that I would definitely go into if I was writing this story, but I might not do it now. I might do that actually when I'm writing and when I actually need to know it. So I'm leaving that there, and then there's the thing with the name. Do I still call these creatures dwarves? Because that's where they started. They look nothing like any dwarf that I have ever read about in a book. This is where things get complicated. If I name them dwarves, then they are... I'm subverting expectations as to what a dwarf is. That could work. They're still short, they're still craftsmen, they're still living underground, so still could work as a dwarf. So I think I'm going to call them that for now. And I might change my mind later, see the names episode, if I do or not. And see also that as to what they call themselves versus what other creatures call them, because not going into that now. Now, as for my non-sentient creature that I'm going to create, I am going to take the example that I used in the other video about this, and I am going to combine a snake and a fox. So if you watched that video and read the comments there, you already know sort of what this creature is going to be, but I'm going to go in a little bit deeper, again, trying to take this a little bit faster, but still getting to all the important bits. So what I'm doing here is that I am combining a fox and a snake. And I know snakes are reptiles and foxes are mammals, so you can't just combine them. That doesn't work. But that is also not actually what I'm doing. I'm just taking characteristics from both of them, and these can be, these characteristics, if you want to combine two creatures that are very, very different in our world, like a reptile and a mammal, you can make it a reptile or a mammal, but use some characteristics either that the other animal has or that humans have ascribed to these other animals, like foxes are cunning and so are snakes, I think. So, that works. So what I'm doing is, this creature, what does it look like? It is a mammal, which is not what it looks like, but it is a mammal. And it has 4 legs. Actually, it looks mostly like a fox. Mostly. And it has fur, and the color of the fur will depend on where they live in the world. It's the color that will make it melt in the best in its surroundings. But the thing I'm taking from snakes is that this creature is venomous, it has fangs, and if it bites you, it will poison you. And this is something that mammals in general in our world don't do. Well, it's mostly insects and reptiles, but it is not unheard of. There are and or have been mammals in our world that have been venomous, so it's not out of the realm of possibility. And the other thing that I'm taking from snakes is that these creatures' tails are very, very long, and they have very good control over them. So it's basically they have a snake as a tail. So they have very good control over these tails, and they can use them to hold their prey down, or they can hold onto, that's something I wrote in my comment to the other video, they can hold onto trees or other solid items if they're outside when it's very, very, very windy outside, so they don't blow away. And why they are out in such harsh winds, I will get to that later. The next question is, where do they live? And I'm going to say that there are variations of this creature in most places in the world, and their characteristics are going to be a little bit different depending on where they live. And here I'm going to focus on the creatures that live, if we can get the map here, around here. This is the area that I picked out during my maps episode to be the area where whatever story I write will take place. It is roughly similar to Europe in climate, not quite, but let's say roughly Europe. Again, though, variations all over the world. So in an area like this that has seasons, I think their fur will be mostly brownish and turn white in the winter, because white fur is very pretty. And the next part of where they live is, do they live alone or in communities? And there I did a little bit of research on foxes off screen, and foxes are mostly solitary. They live alone, and then they get together to have kids, and they raise their kids. And generally they will mate with only one other fox. They're monogamous. So I'm gonna make these creatures live together in couples. So they live 2 and 2, mostly a male and a female, but I'm sure that varies as well. And they will mate, and they will have kids, puppies. What's they called? What are they called? What's a fox baby called? Kits? A kit, a cub, or a pup. I'm gonna call them puppies. They have puppies once a year, and I'm thinking they will be born in spring, because that makes the most sense, because that way they have a lot of time to grow up and become a little bit more independent before winter comes around and life turns harsh. And the rest of that we are leaving to the question about reproducing and life cycles. But this is how they live. They live 2 and 2, they live all over the world, and yeah. Senses. What about their senses? Well, they have hearing, they have sight, they have smell, they have taste, and they have touch. I'm not going to go too deep into this because it doesn't really matter. They have all of these senses, and I will decide in the moment, in the story, how good or bad they are depending on what I might need them for. Right now, doesn't matter. So going to the next question instead, what do they eat? Where are they on the food chain? And they are going to eat meat, because that makes sense. They have their venom that they could use to kill their prey with, and they could probably also use their tail for hunting as a sort of trap. If they have their tail lied out and then they lie really, really still, and a smaller animal comes scurrying in, and they can just grab them. So yeah, they're great hunters. And when they do that, they will probably like cover themselves with dirt and leaves and stuff to hide their scent and to hide themselves. So yeah, that is how they hunt. And so they eat mostly, small animals. They probably also eat carrion if they come across it. So where are they on the food chain? Probably fairly high up. They are, hunters after all. They're probably bigger animals that will be higher than them, but I don't know, somewhere similar to foxes, a little bit higher up, because they also have their venom, which makes them scarier. That's how we're going to do that. How do they communicate? Probably with some sort of sound. I mean, obviously they don't have a language. This is not a sentient creature, but they make sounds. Probably something cute, because I like cute. And then we're getting to how they reproduce and their life cycle, which I promised I'd get back to. Again, they live 2 and 2. They have puppies once a year in the spring, and they're mammals, so they give birth to live children that then need to be nursed. So let's start with that. A few weeks before they don't need nursing anymore, and they can eat prey that their parents bring them. And I'm gonna say that the puppies stay with their parents for I don't know. How about they stay with their parents for about a year until their younger siblings are born? because why not? And then they go out and find their own territories and their own mates. And how many puppies do they get? They get 2 to 5 puppies. And then we get to the issue of what their name is. And again, I'm gonna just do that in the names episode. Right now, they are my fox snakes, my fakes, or socks. Okay, no, right, yes, I promised I would get back to why they are out in those storms, where they grabbed onto things with their tails. And the reason that they are out in the storms is that something. There has to be a reason why they don't go inside. They can't go inside, or they need something from the wind. The wind. Huh. See, I was hoping that while I was coming up with things about this creature, that I would figure out the whole storm thing, but then I forgot to even think about it. So yeah, that didn't happen. Maybe it's not actually a thing. Maybe they are not actually out in the storms, because that was supposed to be the reason why they had those tails. But now they have those tails and they hunt with those tails. So, I mean, maybe that's reason enough for them to have tails like that. So, okay, they are no longer out in the storms. They're just, yeah, their tails are hunting things, not grabbing onto things that are not prey. Let's move on. We are moving on to plants, and as you can see here, the plants have sort of the same kind of questions as creatures, but a little different. And I don't normally make plants. Whenever I do, I use basically these questions, but normally I don't. Normally I try to use plants that exist in our world. But I'm gonna, and that's the thing too. If I create a plant, I do it for a specific reason. Like I said, I've done it because I needed something that rhymed with a certain name. You can do it because you need a poison or an antidote or something. So in my case now, I don't really know where I'm gonna start with this plant. So because I don't know where to start, I am going to start where I always start, which is color. I'm gonna make these pretty. So, so I want a plant that is very colorful and that has different colors on the flower, or like dandelion fuzz. If it's a dandelion, but instead of the fuzz being white, it's other colors, and like when there are many of them, there would be colorful swirls of things in the wind when the fuzz blows around, because I think that would be really pretty. So let's go with that. So what does the plant look like? I guess I'm actually okay. I'm gonna make a. That might not be a lot of fun, but I'm gonna make a dandelion that is just colorful. I might not actually. We'll do it like this. It's a dandelion, but the flower can be different colors, and what color the flower is will determine what color the fuzz is as well. So the fuzz of one flower is still going to be just one color, because I don't want to do the research to find out if they can be different colors and how that would happen. So, yeah. But I'm not going to make it the same color. The flower and the fuzz are going to be different colors, because they are in dandelions. They're yellow flowers and then white fuzz. So they're going to be different colors, and they can be all colors, because I love colors. So they can be like purples or blue or red or yellow or all of that. And then the color of the fuzz is maybe a different nuance of the same color, or like the opposite color of a color wheel or something. Let's make it a different shade of the flower color. So the flower color is lighter. No, the flower color is darker. And then the fuzz is a slightly lighter nuance of the same color. I wonder if they're black ones. They're probably black ones as well, and white ones. But yeah. So where does it grow? Well, it's a dandelion, so it grows everywhere. Everywhere. And it's probably still considered a weed, which is weird. I don't understand why that is, but yeah. And they probably don't actually grow everywhere. They don't grow in the desert, but at least in the area of the world where I'm setting this, there are going to be dandelions. So, what are its properties? And this is because a lot of the time, flowers are created for poison or antidote purposes. So what are its properties? What do you do with it? Both what humans and other sentient beings would do with it, but also animals. Do they eat it? Is it poisonous? And things like that. And so it is mostly a dandelion, meaning it is edible. Its leaves can be used in salads. Are the leaves different colors as well? Can I make the leaves not green? I don't know if I can. I would like to, but let's not. The leaves can be put into salads and things like that, and like let's see. I'm gonna do some really quick research on this because I keep forgetting. Yes, so all the parts of a dandelion can be used, basically. Let's see here. Leaves can be used for salads, and you can brew tea from the roots. You can make wine out of the flowers, and they're also used for certain like herbal medicine and things like that. So yeah, it's very useful, and there's probably lore that certain colors are better for certain ailments if you use them as a herb and things like that. So yes. So that's its properties. It's not poisonous. It's just pretty and very useful. Probably still considered a weed though, because so are dandelions. I mean, the world I have the magical dimension and the technological dimension, so it's probably used more in the magical dimension where they use it as a herb, whereas in the technological one, it's probably considered a weed. And next question is how they reproduce. Well, that's when the colorful fuss goes everywhere and makes new flowers. I don't know how that actually works, but it's the same principle, and I don't need to know the details. If you do need to know the details, look it up. Colors is how they reproduce. Can you tell that I'm getting a bit tired? And what is their name? Well, since basically all I did here was to change the color of a dandelion, I'm just going to call them a dandelion. And if I write this story, I'm just going to establish very early that dandelions can be different colors. And if you are very disappointed in this flower, that it's not really all that complicated, I'm really sorry, but again, I don't really make flowers, so if that's what you came here for, I don't really know why you did, because I'm gonna name this creatures and not plants. So yeah, anyway, sorry. I'm sure there are many other videos on how to create realistic plants for your worlds. So these are the questions that I ask myself when I create new life. I am going to leave a link in the description to where you can find these questions and also these descriptions that I've made for my creatures and flowers. And so I hope you have learned something about how I create creatures, and I hope that this has been helpful in your efforts to create fantasy creatures or aliens. Again, this works just as well for aliens, but you might need to look a little bit into atmospheres and what they can breathe and things like that, but we're not getting into that now. I might make a different video about that if you want. Leave me a comment if you want that. Otherwise, leave a comment about something else, and I will see you in my next video. Thank you so much for watching.